Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nonprofit 2.0. We really started this podcast because at Clary Base, we implement systems for all sorts of different nonprofits, all sorts of different EDs, managers, program managers within nonprofits. And we realized that there's lots of different areas of a nonprofit that we can learn together about and improve on. And today I'm really excited to have Rachel here with me from Pedal. Rachel, I'd love to have you give an introduction of your background and your business.
Yeah, sure. So I fell in love with nonprofit work when I was 16, volunteering in high school, actually with an organization that helps people in the disability community. I think at that point, like I knew, I was like, okay, like I'm meant for this kind of work. So I actually, after I graduated, I worked in various nonprofits for over a decade, and then really started my business. I would say, I think we're almost on 6 years now, and kind of what instigated was I was never officially the marketer, but in my last role, I spent 5 years as a program director for a medium-sized nonprofit. And I kept running into this issue of like, hey, we're trying to grow and we're trying to get people more excited. And we have this gorgeous center, but we have space and people don't know about us enough. And so I kind of accidentally fell into marketing and realized if in order to do my job well, I needed to really build out the organization's marketing department from scratch, or I wouldn't be able to do my job, grow the organization, make the impact we wanted to have. And knew that it might be a good idea to pivot into full-time nonprofit marketing when I started getting calls from other nonprofits in the city saying, hey, can you recommend us your marketing agency? And at first I was so embarrassed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to tell them that it's like me and like, I'm taping it together with scotch tape. But I was like, hey, you know what? Like it really is working, and really being able to see how we went from, trying to get the word out to, overflowing every single program, having to recreate new programs. We saw just incredible growth, and I was able to have a front row seat to like how to do that. And in the past 6 years, I've helped hundreds of nonprofits, everything from like tiny shops with where it's like just the founder to organizations that are raising tens of millions of dollars with the goal of, hey, how do we get people to get a front row seat to the impact that you're having? So they're excited and fired up about getting involved rather than it feeling like this, we got to sell this and pushing it on to people. So that's what I am very, very lucky to do every day.
That's awesome. And I'm so curious about your previous experience, like even as someone who didn't have a marketing background, you were just such a natural at it. How did you get so much? How did you do it? Like, what was the
Okay, yeah.
secret?
Fair question. Yeah. Okay. So firstly, I think like as you said, look, there's definitely something a little bit natural there. I remember ever since I was a kid, everyone always says, oh, like you know how to, let's say we'd go on a trip and I'd come back and like tell the story, and my brother would be like, you make it sound better than it was. Or like, and I'm like, no, no, that's really not what I experienced. But definitely, storytelling is in my blood. But well, I was actually very fortunate that the organization had a PR firm that was just in love with the organization, and there was this awesome rock star of a woman, Esther, and she mentored me, and we did a lot of this work together. Of course, I've read hundreds of books on marketing by now, everything I can get my hands on. And I think that there's nothing like being in the real world and trial and error to like see what works, right? Like I feel like in a classroom, it's a lot of theory. It's like imagine trying to read a book to ride a bike. So I think everything I've learned was hugely helpful, but then combining that with like every day having to cut your teeth and be like, ooh, this didn't work. Oh my gosh, look what this created was really, really cool. And then I got to do that for about 5 years. So that was amazing.
That's really cool because you've obviously lived it and come from that background. So you already know how resource strapped some nonprofits are. And having
Yes.
been through it, I'm sure you're also just really efficient in the kind of work that you do. Yeah. And let's pretend we are the nonprofit that is run by, let's say, a handful of people. We don't have a lot of resources. We don't have an agency that's working with us on our nonprofit marketing. What are some ways that we can improve our existing messaging?
For sure. Okay. One of the large mistakes I see actually is nonprofits. I think this is like decades and decades of this problem is that nonprofits really feel like they need to be really professional. Like there's this need, an obsession around like we need to come off as really polished or really professional. Like we're almost trying to, I don't know, copy like, a bank or this like huge Fortune 500 company. And what's very interesting is that I'll see so many, you've had that experience as well. Like, I think the nonprofit people are some of like the best humans in the world. And then you get their emails and it's like, oh my God, like there is no way this person wrote that email. And even if they did, because there's none of them in it, there's none of their passion, there's none of their excitement, there's none of that. Like, hey, do you know what just happened 5 minutes ago? And I think it's because nonprofits want to be taken really seriously, right? Like if you're like, hey, we're trying to create this massive change and we need to raise this enormous amount of money, there's this huge fear of like, well, what if I'll come off as not polished or not serious enough to deserve this kind of funding or this kind of attention. And so I think a lot of that plays into the way nonprofits communicate. So I think the first thing I want nonprofits to know is like, you have so much inside of you and your team that no marketing agency has, right? Like you have that passion, you have that fire, you are seeing day to day what's going on. Like that is your superpower. The reason your marketing might not be great is because you're probably not using those things. Like you have this amazing toolkit, you're not using it. Looks like you want to jump in. Please do, because I can go on a rant.
Yeah, I think this sense of like being really polished and being really professional is how we're just always trained to be, right? Because you have to be serious and you have to seem like you're bigger than you are. So what you're saying is really, well, let's tie it back to who we really are as a team, and we're really passionate about the cause that we're supporting, and we have that fire within us, but in email that doesn't quite come through. So how do you help people get that passion and that fire through into their messaging and their communications and their
Yeah.
marketing?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you, like this story is kind of funny. I had this founder I was working with and there was something about her, like she was kind of on the short side, like very petite. And people always thought she was much younger than she was. Not that she was old, she was a young founder, plus, just the way she looked maybe knocked off another 5 to 10 years. And she never wanted to show her face on their social media because she was like, oh, if people see me, they won't take me seriously. And then actually interviewing people in her community. And what sold every single person, every one of like the people that were like fans of the cause was when they met her, right? They had reservations. The minute they met the founder, they were like, oh my goodness, like we're all in. So the first thing I'll tell people is start voice noting yourself. I mean, I do this to remind myself things or whatever it is, but the minute we're so used to and we're so trained, as you said, to write in a polished way, but usually talking like we know how to talk to a friend. So sometimes I'll tell people just voice note yourself, like, what do you really want to say? And then you can always pop that in and polish it up a little bit. Or I'll tell people, write this just to one specific person, right? I want you to think of one donor that you guys get along, that you get along with really well. You've got a great rapport. Write it just for her. And suddenly, like, you can't use all that stuffy language because that person would be like, wait, what? Right? Like, you don't talk that way. So I think that's a really great way. Another thing I'll tell people to do is no matter how small your team is, any person that's interacting with the people you serve, right, like delivering the programs, you should have some kind of shared. It could be as simple as a shared Google Doc or Excel. It could be, it could be your Monday.com board, whatever it is, where you are sharing every little micro story. And the word story scares people because they think it's got to be huge. Like we changed this person's life. They went from A to Z. But actually, the little tiny stories is usually what resonates very much because it's so believable and real. And a lot of nonprofits skip those because A, they think that they're not valuable enough to share. And B, they might just be so close that to them, it's like no big deal, right? It's like, oh, of course, this woman came in and she, had nothing to wear for an interview. And of course, we were able to, give her that perfect outfit so that she can go off, right? And give her that confidence. Like, of course, like it's just what we do every Monday. Like it's not special. What's going to be special is that we're going to wait to hear that one story where, now she's, head of a fortune, but whatever, right? They're looking for this like home run. And the little moments are the things that fuel you. So it's even like, what is one thing that happened today where you're like, this is why I do what I do, or that you're proud of? And even if it's like a mini journal, your whole email could be like, hey, I wanted you to see this. And it could be a screenshot of someone who is just telling you, like, oh my goodness, thank you for what you did yesterday. And you can add 3 lines and just say, this happened because of you, right? Like, it doesn't have to be fancy, complicated, overly styled, right? Like, And I'll say one more thing. I'm such a I can just like go on and on. But I'll say one more thing on this, which is that largest companies are trying to do this. So the companies that are worth billions, they are putting a lot of marketing money into seeming like, hey, we're just a couple of people. We're this small shop that wants to connect with you. You see all these like giant brands on Twitter where like the social media manager of these like huge brands is like commenting like they're your best friend. They're actually wishing they had what you had. And so if you're like, hey, I want to be like the big guys, this is what the big guys are doing anyway, right? So we're like almost copying the wrong thing, but we're like, hey, we want to copy the big guys. Yeah.
That's such a good perspective to have. When we're small, we're trying to seem bigger. And when we're bigger, we want to feel personal and feel small and feel neighborly. And it can feel like a really small thing to us, but no one would know or no one would be critical of you celebrating a small win or a small success or just a friendly note of thanks from somebody else that you help.
And I would add to that. I think the real fear is, right? Like if I share a little win, you'll think that's all that we do or that's all that we're capable, which will tie into the frequency of communication, right? When we're waiting to do everything polished and perfect, then we hold off communication, right? If you're emailing someone once a quarter, yeah, you're right. That's really scary to send one little story because that one little story has carries so much weight, right? Like if all I hear from you is two or three times, that's going to be my full perception. But it's the same way how like I find this just like with friends that it was on a bachelorette weekend a couple of months back. So we know each other since the third grade. Okay. And one of the things we were saying is like when I say a comment or a remark, I don't have to filter myself at all because even if it's you're like, ooh, that's a little judgy, or is that a little mean, or is that whatever, like if that person knows me really well, it's within context of everything they know about me. And that's why the judgment fades, right? You know me. So you know if I said that I meant X, I didn't mean Y. Why that happens is because that interaction is like 0.25% of one interaction of all of them. However, if we have only one interaction and it would come across as rude, you'd be like, you're a rude person because there's only that one interaction. So I like to be like,
Mhm.
hey, even if someone is like, hey, isn't that story a little small? But if they've heard, if this is their 40th story, they already know, hey, we've got small wins, we've got big wins. And it also comes off as much more trustworthy because even those massive stories, we all know they're not happening every day. So that's why we should be communicating more rather than less if we need more reason.
Yeah. And uh, how do you come how do you balance that communication of like how often we're communicating? What are the things that are worthy of communication? Is there such a thing as being too frequent, being too small? Like, how do you help people balance that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So 99, or like if I want to be very conservative, 90% of organizations are not sending enough communication. The reason is that we forget that when we're creating content, we picture like when I send out a monthly email to my list. And there's a part of me that can't help myself that to picture that, Cherry, if you would get my email, you'd be like sitting on your porch with your coffee and like pulling out and being like, ooh, fun, an email. I'm gonna read every line. I'm gonna like focus on it. I'm not going to be interrupted. I'm not going to be doing seven other things while I like glance away. But we know how we read email. We're like, oh, go, 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 right? So because of that, we think we already said that last week, or they already heard from us 2 weeks ago. So first of all, just remembering that people are skimming, they're giving a quick glance. And so first realizing that, and so realizing that the depth isn't as deep as you might think, but then also look at every for-profit brand. I mean, search Target in your email inbox. Suddenly you're going to be like, oh my God, wow, Target sends me like 7 emails a day. Like, isn't that excessive? But you don't even notice, right? Because maybe you're seeing 1 in 4 and it's catching you at the right time. And so as long as every single piece of communication is something that's, I like to be like, look, there's so much bad news in the world. You are that like little light, right? So you want people to be like, ooh, that's something fun. That's something like that should stand out in their inbox as like this little treat of like a little treat of good news, of a win, something that I helped made happen today. So maybe my day didn't go great, but suddenly I'm like, oh wow, I was part of this cool little story. You don't have to email every day, but definitely email every week. Like people can use it. They can use it.
Yeah, thinking of ourselves as a little light that's in the world, celebrating a small success in their community. I think just that's That's great because there is so much terrible news in the world right now.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I always think about when we're building systems for marketing teams or when we're building systems for marketing purposes, there's often this like strategy and the campaign and then an asset and like a lot of different tasks get tied to it. Where we're really talking about that task level of creating the posts every single day or every so often that makes sense to the organization. How do you approach it from a top down level when it comes to strategy in that organization?
So, firstly, I like to think of two categories: everyday marketing and then a campaign, with not one being more important than another, but just I like to divide them. So, with everyday marketing, when I'm working with an organization that, let's say has a robust enough team to implement well, we're planning out like 1 month ahead. But what we'll always do is we leave space for spontaneity, right? Because the danger of planning out like a month of content is like, well, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And so I really like to balance, let's say, a month of content with some, at least 50% of the ideas, let's say, will be evergreen, which means is we can always bump them to next month and replace it with that in the moment inspiration. Like, hey, we just caught this moment and it's so special. Okay, bump that post that's supposed to go out tomorrow. We can just bump that down to next week. And then of course we have the content that must go out this Tuesday because it's about next week's program or whatever it is. So I really like to, like I said, map out the whole, but leave that room for spontaneity. I would say with campaigns, they are a lot more, strategic. Like we know what's happening. Boom, boom, boom. And that's often because we're with a campaign, we're trying to do a lot in a short amount of time. So keep being mindful of that. We're going to map it all out. Of course, we'll be open to like little small tweaks, but I would say like if I'm doing everyday content with an organization, maybe 30% will change with once it interacts with our real life, and with a campaign maybe it's more like 95% will remain.
Okay, that's really cool. So you really think about it as the day to day that could be evergreen, could be pushed out if necessary. And then there's the campaign that you're planning on a long-term basis, but leaving some room for spontaneity. For your content that's spontaneous, how do you actually source that from the whole team? Because everyone is so busy. They've got their programming work they're responsible for, they've got reporting work that they're responsible for, they've got fundraising work that they're responsible for. How do you build in that consistency of when something good does happen spontaneously, how do you like feed that through to the actual marketing team?
Great. So that's such a good question. And it is, it does differ from organization to organization. Because what motivates the team, how busy they are, how much they're interacting,
Mhm.
all depends.
Yeah.
But that being said, what I'm thinking about one particular client where a lot of the staff were quite resistant. They're like, we're here to do this work. Marketing is like arts and crafts, not important, cherry on top. They didn't necessarily see the connection of how marketing is going to help their everyday work, right? In a practical sense. They weren't like bought into marketing, which is okay. And so one of the things we did was firstly created sort of like these are the types of moments that we need, right? First of all, they all know what to look for. And then as we were pumping out more, we were able to like push it back to them, be like, remember this we want, like this is exactly what we're looking for. And I think that really helps simplify, because I think there's like that overwhelm. Following up with the staff and giving them that recognition. So whether that's in this, their Slack channel or in their, staff WhatsApp group of saying like, hey, you captured this moment. Like I had one client that actually also serves the individuals with disabilities. And one of their staff captured this moment where they were like in the movie theater, and one of the participants was just said something so like hilarious and sweet. And it was like a 15-second clip. I ended up popping some text over it. My team, we pushed it out. It got almost a million views. It brought in thousands of new followers. And to go back to that staff member or to the staff in general and be like, hey, you did this. Look how many people found the organization because of you. Look how many people this little clip inspired. Obviously, not everything's going to go viral, and we don't want to set up that expectation for them. I think it really does give them the boost, and they can start, slowly converting into, marketers, hopefully.
And let's say the team in-house is already doing what they can and they're looking to get some more help. How should people decide on an agency?
So to me, I would just steer clear of anyone that is going to tell you that you can outsource it to them and they're going to be able to get you great results. This is like, I remember a client came, they said, oh, our previous agency said, you can go to sleep and we'll create the campaign. And there is no way. It sounds so appealing because nonprofits are spread so thin and so much. And it could just be like telling the founder, hey, I need a voice note where you explain to me why X or why Y, and I'm wanting to use the way you speak. I'll tell a founder like I work with founders all across the globe, and I was working with a founder who has a British accent, and I'm like, I want people to read your email in a British accent, right? But you have the stories, you have the inspiration, you know why you do this work. They are the professional, the packaging, not, but you have the gift, right? So make sure they are digging in, taking things from you. They should be interviewing your donors. They should be interviewing the people, the recipients of your cause, your volunteers. They should be digging deep. You have gold, all right? So if they're not mining for your gold, then whatever they're putting out is just shiny plastic. So I think that's just a great way off the bat of saying, how are you going to, feel what we feel? Like, how are you going to be fired up? How are you going to know what's happening on the ground? And if they don't have a great system of how much they're going to bother you, and I mean that in the best way, and it's hard work. Like I'll say, hey, listen, you told me I would be able to talk to 10 recipients of the cause. I only got 4. You got to follow up with them. You got to get them to book the call on my calendar so I can talk to them. So I think that's a great way I think, to vet out some of the people that are going to promise you like, hey, you'll only have to meet with me for 30 minutes a month and I'll give you 30 pieces of content without talking to anyone on your team. It's just not going to be the quality you want.
That's such a good piece of advice because for the person who's maybe worked with agencies before but hasn't found a right one, or they've just had an internal team and are looking for their first marketing partner or agency of some sort, really understanding what sorts of language and how they want to work as well. Because maybe some organizations do want that low touch approach and they want a different kind of deliverable, but for a nonprofit that has a lot of heart, a lot of fire, a lot of that, a lot of those golden nuggets that you talked about just in their day to day, you do really want someone that's working with you hand in hand to deliver the outcomes and to deliver the posts that they're actually looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
It's great. And any other like parting comments that you want to leave for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think it's an interesting balance because I'm so passionate about excellent nonprofit marketing. But I think anytime we have a discussion where we're telling nonprofits, here's what you should do, and here's maybe where you're falling short, to just one of the things I always remember and is like top of mind for me is that the reason nonprofits are if they are neglecting marketing, it's because they are so busy delivering the work, doing the work, right? They're out in the trenches. And I think it is kind of easy for agencies or consultants to kind of sit in their offices and look down and be like, hey, this email is to X or to Y, or how come you didn't send a gratitude sequence? And so I think that, my message to nonprofits is like, I know, I get it. Like you are so busy doing the actual work. And that's why marketing is maybe being pushed to the side. But what we also want to remember at the same time is that marketing is going to help you. It's not separate from your mission. It's part of your mission. If you want to, I don't know, say end homelessness, a big part of that is getting people to understand why it's happening, why they should care, inspiring them to move. Every nonprofit I know, they're not looking to like help 100 people and call it a day. You want to have this outsized massive impact that requires marketing. So I think reminding yourself, reminding your team of like, we're doing this because this is part of the work, I think can give them that push to do what they need. And the other piece though is that, and this is hard to swallow, but it is the truth, is that what you're not saying is also a message. So a lot of us think like, hey, if I didn't do anything bad, right? Like I didn't send out any like cringy emails or, I'm kind of safe. Like when I have a chance, I'll get it together and I'll send you something good. But like if you did a fundraiser in December, right? We're already now mid-April. If you have not communicated back to those donors, For them, their experience is you took my money and ran, right? It's like if the tree falls in the forest and no one hears it. So by not communicating, by going quiet, you're sending a message. The message is, we're not doing anything. Of course, that's not the case. Of course, you're quiet because you are doing the thing. But if you don't tell me, I don't know. If I go to your Instagram page and the last post you posted was January 5th, my assumption is you've done nothing in the past 3 months. Is that true? Of course, that's not true. But that is the perception. If I donated to 2 nonprofits and one of them emailed me 8 times since my last donation of all the great work they did, and you've emailed me 0, even if you've done double the amount of that organization, that's not the message I'm receiving. So remember that by not talking, by going silent, it's also a message. And so we do have that responsibility, to our mission, to ourselves, to the work we want to do, to show up well.
Yeah, that's such a powerful point. Silence is also a message. I love that. And it's such a helpful reminder. Where can people find you?
Okay. So I have an Instagram page. It's called thepedal.co. And that just exists for me to share little bite-sized tips that nonprofits can implement like right away. They're quick tips. I try to post at least 2 or 3 tips a week. And then of course you could, and feel free to like DM me if you heard this and you want to chat more about it, like just DM me, I'm right there. And then you can also go on my website, thepedal.co. It's also a great place to subscribe to my email. I send only 1 email a month, but but I really work hard to make that, really valuable for nonprofits. And of course, if you want to work together, you can DM me on Instagram, fill out the form on my website, and we can see if we're a good fit for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and experience. I think there were lots of cool little nuggets for me to even take away that silence is also a message, as well as just recognizing that small pieces of updates are still valuable to share with the community. And of course, building in a little bit of spontaneity into the content that we're all planning to release. That's
Well,
great.
thank you so much. First of all, pleasure chatting with you, and also a pleasure to step away from the work I've been doing today
Yeah.
and just to geek out and talk about marketing. It's super super fun. So really really appreciate the invite and having this opportunity to sit down with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And for the folks who are listening, we're part of the Clary based team. We implement systems, sometimes for marketing, sometimes for fundraising, and certainly lots of different types of programming databases. If you are ever looking to improve your messy data and clean all of those up, you can find us at clarybase.com.